If you've ever stood inside a medieval barn, monastery outbuilding, or timber-framed house that predates your entire family line, you might have noticed something that defies all modern expectations. The beams aren't crumbling, the posts aren't soft, the floors haven't given way. Meanwhile, modern wood constructions, built with treated lumber, protective coatings and concrete supports, sometimes rot out in just a few decades. Yet these medieval structures endured centuries of storms, floods and frost. For serious history enthusiasts and survival-minded builders, this raises a question worth digging into. How did medieval craftsmen preserve wood so effectively without chemicals, modern preservatives or pressure treating? Why did their methods outperform solutions that require industrial manufacturing today? The answer lies in a quiet architectural trick that protected wood from rot long before concrete footings existed. Before we get into the details, let's set the hook the way this channel always does. Throughout Europe, the Middle East and parts of Asia, archaeologists have uncovered timber that survived wars, collapses and entire cultural shifts. Viking-era boathouses in Norway still contain solid wooden posts that were anchored before 1100 AD. Monastic storehouses built during the High Middle Ages still have sill beams that ring with strength when struck. In alpine regions, medieval granaries stood on wooden legs for centuries, never succumbing to decay. These weren't miracles, they weren't lucky survivors. They were the result of a reliable, repeatable technique. And once you understand it, you can use the exact same principle to build long-lasting structures on your own land without relying on concrete or synthetic preservatives. Now, let's move beyond the hook and get directly into the historical engineering behind this survival-grade technique. The medieval method began by understanding that wood only rots when water stays still long enough to feed decay organisms. Medieval builders didn't think in terms of chemistry. They thought in terms of patterns. They saw that wood buried directly in soil rotted. They saw that wood exposed to constant dampness collapsed, and they recognized that stagnant moisture was the true enemy. Their solution was to keep water moving and keep wood elevated. The trick was simple: set wooden beams on stone instead of soil. These stones weren't ornamental, they were moisture barriers. By lifting the wood even a few inches off the ground, they prevented constant contact with wet earth and ensured rainwater drained away instead of pooling. This single choice, stone footing instead of soil contact, is why medieval structures outlived countless modern fences, sheds and barns. If you want to apply this today, begin with a gravel bed or flat stones wherever your posts or beams will sit. A layer of compacted gravel, at least a foot deep, allows water to flow downward instead of sideways. Place a dense stone or concrete block above that layer and rest your beam on it. You're recreating the medieval system that kept the post and beam houses of Germany and Poland standing firm for centuries. It requires no chemicals, no expensive products, and no machinery, just physics and water management. The second layer of the medieval trick involved preventing moisture from ever settling into the wood in the first place. This is where their cleverness shines even more. Medieval craftsmen felled timber in late winter when sap levels were lowest and internal moisture was naturally reduced. Wood cut during the dormant season is less attractive to fungi and insects because it contains fewer sugars. Then they seasoned the beams slowly in covered, ventilated spaces. They never dried wood in sealed barns or stacked it directly on the ground. Instead, they raised it on stones or timbers and allowed air to move around every surface. Slow seasoning locked in structural stability and prevented the hairline cracking that later invites water intrusion. One of the most overlooked but critical components of this medieval practice was intentional airflow built into the structure itself. Rot thrives where moisture lingers, and medieval builders understood that a breathing building was a living building. Barns, longhouses and storage structures all had vents, gaps, elevated floors and open eaves. This wasn't sloppy craftsmanship. It was survival engineering. Constant air movement ensured that wood never remained wet long enough for decay organisms to colonize it. Even buildings that stood in foggy climates like the Highlands of Scotland or the low valleys of Switzerland survived because their design never trapped moisture. When building your own shed, cabin or barn, you know it's really wise to incorporate the same idea. Leave vents on opposing walls to create a cross breeze. Elevate the floor even just a few inches above ground using stones or block footings. Use soffit vents or small gaps under the eaves. What medieval builders did intuitively, you can do intentionally. Another major part of the technique was the deliberate use of sacrificial layers and charred surfaces. In several regions, especially Scandinavia, the ends of posts were lightly charred before being set into stone bases. The charring created a carbonized shell that resisted insects, moisture, and bacterial colonization. Even when posts had to be partially embedded in soil, this charring process gave them decades or even centuries of additional life. Archaeologists studying Iron Age and medieval settlements consistently find post ends that were burned before use. To apply this today, char the lower portion of any post that will be near the ground. Use a controlled flame and slowly blacken the surface until the outer fibres carbonize. Brush away the loose soot and allow the post to cool. You've created a natural, long-lasting protective layer without chemicals or treatments. What makes this ancient method so powerful is that it wasn't one single trick, but a complete system built around observing natural forces rather than fighting them. Wood stayed dry because it was cut at the right time, seasoned correctly, elevated off soil, protected from pooled water, and surrounded by moving air. Medieval builders didn't rely on products, they relied on principles, and those principles still outperform shortcuts today. If you build anything for long-term survival, whether it's a woodshed, smokehouse, chicken coop, or a small off-grid cabin, this medieval technique will extend the life of your structure dramatically. It's a perfect example of old-world intelligence solving modern-world problems. If you found this guide genuinely useful and want more deep historical insights grounded in real-world application, subscribe to In the Beginning and share this video with fellow enthusiasts. Your support keeps this kind of knowledge alive.